Hello, 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 and welcome to yet another episode of the Conversation Capital with myself, your host, Ursula Mariani, and Ubonga Buata. This is me.
How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How's Asa doing?
Us is doing really well.
Guys, Asa's growing so old, or older, that she's at the place where she says to Bonga, no pictures.
Imagine.
Like, I know what Popia is.
Yeah.
I know what consent looks like. It's so cute. She's like, Mommy, no pictures. Because Bonga wants to record everything she does. It's like, Mommy, no pictures. I looked at that. I'm like, oh, my baby's growing.
She's really growing.
How's our doing, Given?
I was doing great, eh? She's also at that stage of exploring her autonomy.
Yay.
We were just laughing last night when Nessa was trying to feed her food and like, no. I'm like, yeah, no. Autonomy at work right here.
I'm telling you. That's so cool. So today we're chatting to a trusted friend of the show. And just to reflect, I mean, a lot of people, they cut clips from this on TikTok and socials. And people discuss, the different tiers that Mr. Tamineta, hi, walked us through. Great, thank you so much for joining us.
I've got a 8-year-old who's going on 13, so a 10-year-old, sorry, is going on 13. So my struggles are different.
So you've got like a cheeky 10-year-old.
Yeah, the opinions are quite unique now. There's arguments because they've got school. Sorry, continue.
No, I was gonna reflect on the previous episode. It did really well, and people really enjoyed it. Where you speak of the 3 different tiers, whether you're a builder, a founder, builder, or a maintainer. So if you guys haven't seen that, check it out. And so we're building on that episode today. We want to talk about all things to do with social mobility. What does it mean to be in a different class, and who better to talk about that than you, sir? Mr. Tamineta, hi, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me back. Much
Thank you so much. First of all, let's start with congratulations. I know. You're looking at me like, don't say it, but I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. So Tammy started his own podcast. Yes,
I have.
Thank you. What's the name of the podcast?
Don't chew with your mouth open.
Yes, don't chew with your mouth
It's basically the concept. It comes from a British saying. It's about bad manners. People mustn't be able to see your food. But we're talking more about wealth creation and how it doesn't need to be a public thing. You don't need to show off or floss. Just go about the business of building. And once you are able to build in private, you are able to even go further than you would if you were seen by people as wealthy or rich. So studies show that millionaires who are unknown, or even some billionaires who are known, live happier lives than those who are known. So the concept is to talk about principles, about social mobility, wealth creation, without showing people your food in your mouth.
Sure, that's really dope. And people can find that on
YouTube.
It's so silly for me to do plugging right at the beginning of the episode, because Tammy could now walk out and be like, well, my job here is done.
No. Principles, commitments.
So on YouTube.
Yes.
Don't chew with your mouth open. So guys, go like, share, and subscribe.
Thank you.
Especially because it's got everything to do with just wealth and how to accumulate wealth. And I think that's really dope. And these are conversations we need to start seeing from Black people. We need to start seeing from individuals that look like us, for us to know that it's attainable, it's possible. And so I really like it. I mean, I think of immediately Financial Fitness Bunny, Nicolette Mashile. It was nice to see a Black woman, stepping forward, talking about money. And we're like, how? Black women get to talk about this? Black women, are seen in that light. It's nice. It's really nice. So, Tammy, thank you so much for the work.
No problem. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So, social mobility. Social mobility, you sent me a sort of summary, but I was like, what does this even mean? But, as we're now like chatting off camera, and you make very casual examples around it. So, layman's terms, what's social mobility? What does that mean?
So it's moving classes, simply put, but more direct. It's escaping poverty to a place of financial security. And how it happens, sometimes over generations, sometimes over one person's lifetime. It's something that started studying, ironically, from university. And I've continued to study it going forward to try and understand. We live in the developing world, and there's a lot of change that happens in people's lives over the course of their lives. So understanding how best we can use our environment and the tools we have to our advantage, so we can build ourselves out of poverty. which is something that's quite a difficult mountain to climb. So we need to have those strategies, how we can help each other and how we can secure ourselves and the future of our children and our family members going forward.
Do you know why I like this topic? Immediately, I think of social mobility. I think of how people will grapple at what seems like low-hanging fruit to look like you're in a better standing. So you find this Kotani culture amongst black people, right? The whole concept of like buying Gucci, buying Louis Vuitton, in an attempt to grab at straws of looking like you come from a higher social or class standing that you are. And what happens in that is that people actually get caught up in debt, and they find it, and that's actually not real social classing.
So there's two things to that. The
Yeah.
first thing is we don't promote, or as a people group, we haven't worked hard to promote a progression that's meaningful. And there's two reasons for that. The first is consumerism. So if you've got an economy with big companies that are trying to sell things, when you have a group of people who are now going to consume those things, you are not predisposed to having them exit that class. So if you're a ShopRite, you're not predisposed to motivating people leaving you and going to Woolworths, for example, right? So you are going to structure your marketing to suit people in that category only. The second reason, I think, is we are a very large group of people. If you say black people in general, we're a very large group, whereas if you take, say, Indian people or Asian Chinese people or Jewish people, they're very small social groups that have had long-lasting traditions and culture around spirituality, wealth, and society. So their ability to transcend poverty and move on is predicated on that. Whereas we are a vast group of people with multiple cultures, multiple faiths. And so to try and uplift all of us is a very difficult task because to unify us is hard. So it then has to become an individual pursuit. And if all of us individually pursue it over time, then we will all escape. But it's a difficult thing for all of us to do it. And we all try and get all black people together to, there's a lot that is easy to differentiate us. And I think our biggest struggle will be that over time, how to get a people group to see the same. So you'll find smaller countries are able to do it faster than bigger countries. So a Rwanda or Singapore or South Korea will be able to transition from a poor country to a wealthy country at a better rate than a country like Brazil or South Africa with 70 odd million people who are that diverse. It's difficult to have one South Africa, call it. It's a much simpler task to have one Mauritius or one Rwanda. So we're not honest about those type of hurdles. So it becomes then a individual or a family or a community thing. So you decide as your community, this is what we value, and we're going to strive to develop ourselves in that regard. And that's the function.
Why
of
it's easier to have one Mauritius, one Rwanda? Is it because there's a population?
There's a small population which is largely homogeneous, right? So if you cater for that, it's a much easier thing to do than it is if you are a large population that is diverse. And even you can go as far as China. They are largely homogeneous, but there are many. So they need an authoritarian government. So you don't have as much freedom of choice. Whereas here in South Africa, you have a lot of freedom of choice. You get to decide how you want to live. So to then come together and say this is the goal and we should all appreciate this one goal becomes more complex because there'll be one guy on the one side who'll say, but I'm Muslim and this is how we do it. And another will say, but I'm Christian. Then another will say, I'm white, I'm black. Then another will say, I'm Zulu. Another will say, I'm Bedi. And those differences then make it tougher, not impossible, but tougher to drive that one country, one national vision.
You spoke of, as we were getting into the topic offline, you spoke of the nuances to this upward social mobility, the fact that we will not have the same experience. So I'd like you to get a bit into that.
So the way you've got to look at it is two people can walk into a store, into a school, into an environment, and you assume these two people are the same, right? And both people could have come from the township. but one has a mom who's a nurse and a dad who's a teacher, and the other's mom is a domestic worker and the dad is not around. They have completely different upbringings, and those upbringings then trace or can put them in a position to go further, right? And the more you may have the right motivation, but access is also a key element. So the child of a teacher or a nurse will definitely have a different set of opportunities that will come to them that the child of a domestic worker might not. So a child of a domestic worker might have a scenario in which her employers decide, okay, we're going to sponsor your kid to go to St. Mary's or Rodin or whatever school. But she arrives there and has never had that experience, doesn't know anything. Whereas the child of the teacher may say, yes, let's also go to Rodin, but the dad is a teacher. He understands other teachers. He has met other teachers in those environments and can communicate to his child what to expect. The mom is a nurse. She deals with doctors, understands how doctors live, where they spend, where their kids go to school, and has had exposure to those environments. So are able to equip their child better than the domestic worker. So two people seemingly from the same environment have completely different set of hurdles to come out of the poverty or the environment which they're trying to escape or to elevate to the next class. And I think those nuances are not discussed because they look the same. They appear the same. They're coming from the same place, but their experiences and their opportunity sets are very different. And that must not be taken for granted when analyzing such scenarios.
That's so true, and important to factor in. I'm just reflecting back into varsity, and I think even now it still exists. Like there are people who are seeing a computer for the first time.
Yes.
So we are both at VITS or UJ or whatever, but our experience, even our completion of the assignment will not be the same because I have to go through this, for the lack of a better word, tedious process of learning how to use computers. I can even think about, a lot of universities are now, factoring this in, but I even think about language. There's now language classes, maybe as a supplementary thing, for all first years. But even that, so you have the right ideas, you have the right capacity, but how you put it onto, especially I did BA, so we did a lot of essays. So, but how you put it into an essay may not be as good as another student,
And that's not a reflection on your intelligence.
No.
It's a reflection of your opportunity set. So you haven't had the opportunity set to learn the English language in a way where you can communicate to a invigilator or a marker your ideas and your thoughts, right? Whereas someone else has had a writing course they did when they were in high school. They spent a lot of time with their English teacher, and they were able to then grasp the concepts of communication, written communication.
Yes.
So two people can come from the same place but have completely different exposures, and as a result, they are on different planes. So we then must understand which plane we are on, and not then try and do what the other person is doing when we recognize that we're on different planes, even though we catch the same taxi coming from the same neighborhood.
And, I'm thinking, I wouldn't assume that this person watches, so I don't know whether to, but to tell the story, I need to say his name and what we used to call him at school. There was this kid that I was in class with. We used to call him. It's silly now that I think of it. And he seemed not to have a problem with it. And we were all kids. And I was with this guy in class throughout. I remember we separated grade 7 when we were going to high school. I'm not sure which high school he went to. And I never thought of the root of that name and why we called him that. I never thought of it. It was just, for me, it caught on, and I got to the school and people were calling him that, and that was how it was. And then one day now, as an adult, I'm at a petrol station and he's the petrol attendant, and he gets super excited to see me, and we have a chat. And then I realized how much effort it was for his parents for him to be there. It was a government school, but one of those Model C, even in the area where we grew up, whatever. But it was still a government school. But seeing what in El Mazapa, it was an effort to send him there, and realizing that he was called because he was often like dirty. But I didn't see that way. He was a boy. For me, I always just related it to boys being boys and always. But other kids were seeing that this kid is not so polished looking first thing in the morning. You know what I mean? And really, I never connected the dots. But I remember in this moment where we're having a chat and I'm more realizing where he was coming. Like, actually, where were you coming from to go to the school that we were, like, you know, the area that we went to? He was like, oh no, I live wherever. And then it hit me like, oh, this kid was like, his parents were really like, I don't know whether I don't even know if he's got parents actually, guardians, whatever. We're really reaching to make sure that he, you know, ends up there. But our trajectories were always going to be different.
Correct.
But it didn't look that way.
At that point.
It didn't look that way at that point. We're all in school uniform at the end of the day. You're a kid. Like I said, I never related that name to like being, you know, any type of social classing lower than the rest of us. I just thought it was just a nickname that he got because it rhymed or whatever. And I remember looking at it now as an adult through the lens of an adult and seeing how it was bigger than just the school. Like you're speaking of Wits. It's bigger than just going to Wits.
Correct.
You know, because we'll all be doing, what's that business course? There's a BCom, some places they call it BCom General, BCom Business. Yeah, but a BCom General. And somebody else after that, they're going to go run their dad's business.
Yeah.
Whereas with you could struggle to find a job with that degree.
Correct.
And so, you know, realizing that just because you're at an institution, but there can be huge differences that speak more towards what you're going to be after that.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. The first one is to say, if you are the parent of, we must call him something else, Steve.
Yeah. I also don't like. I think, and now I don't like it as an adult, but then it felt like nothing.
If you as parents, your greatest achievement is making him realize that he is where he is in his life. Hiding that reality makes it harder for him to progress.
Yes.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is also recognizing that it's a sacrifice. So it's a very large sacrifice moving up a social ladder. You've got to think about it like a plane. A plane uses most of its fuel taking off, right? Because it has to break through the gravity barrier and get to a point where it can cruise. Once it's cruising, it can turn left, it can turn right. The ease of movement is different. But getting to that is very hard. So you're going to burn a lot of fuel getting to that plane where you can turn left or right, that level, right? Whatever, 40,000 feet.
I like this
right?
example.
So we've got to recognize that for a lot of people, they burn out or don't have the fuel to break that. So he lived in that scenario where he might not necessarily have been the dumbest guy in the room, but his family makeup and his situation didn't give him the fuel to break through to get to cruising altitude. And that reality must be there for all of us, no matter where you are on the hierarchy. Even if today you were to win lotto and have 100 million rand, you've gotten to a place in life which is unexpected. You don't know how people with 100 million rand live. What do they do? What decisions do they make? What's important, not important? Like how do I live with a lifetime worth of money? And which is why 94% of people who win the lottery lose it all. That's why shows like I Blew It are popular. Because you suddenly take someone from one plane and teleport them to another, and it's unknown to them. How do I live in a world where I have 500,000 rand in my bank when I'm living off? I mean, the average lady who works at Checkers or who earns 5,000. So that lady wins lotto. She's now in a totally different world and must deal with that. She must suddenly deal with not having to queue at a bank and being told you have a banker. You know, so it takes a lot of energy and fuel to move a class. And it takes a lot to stay there. And that's the part we also don't discuss, right? That it's not easy thing to stay in the middle class. One bad decision away of going back to your rural areas, right? So all these things are never discussed because we assume we're all the same, and in essence we're not. So your kids could all be going to St. Stithians, right? But are your kids the same as other kids? And if you are the Steve's parents and taking your kids to St. Stithians, you have to be blunt. You have to say, this is what your school costs. This is what mom and dad earn.
The point that I'm going to challenge you on, though. This is the point that I'm going to maybe not challenge you on, but when does a kid get a chance to be a kid?
It's okay to challenge the guest, Ursh. It's not offensive. Relax.
Correct. I think also that's a luxury. It's a luxury for people who live in a different class. If you are in a class where you're fighting for your place in the sun, you don't have that luxury. And that's the reality. And unfortunately, we don't communicate that reality. A kid who's on scholarship at Michael House, you have to be very blunt to your child that my boy, my girl, if you are at St. Anne's, this is your shot. Me as your mom and dad, what we can do is this school around the corner. Anything else is outside, no matter how hard, even if I were to rob a bank, I can't do this. And you as a child need to know that. And I think it doesn't rob you of your childhood. It just makes you more informed. And this is the thing we take back from children. Children don't know everything we know. They only know what we teach them. So my children only know what I've taught them and exposed them to. And if I expose them to the realities of life, it doesn't take away from the joys of being children. It's not mutually exclusive. So knowing your reality does not mean you can't enjoy your life, right? It actually, to some degree, means you actually can, because you now know your realistic limitations. Whereas a kid who doesn't know the reality, dad loses the job, suddenly we must move schools, suddenly we must move neighborhoods, has a more traumatic experience. And that could actually ruin them. Whereas if you're honest, my boy, my girl, you're here on scholarship. This is mom and dad's limitations. We love you. We want to give you the best shot. This is the reality of the earth. And once they have that picture, and that's the picture they understand, they know how to enjoy their lives and have fun and live. But they now know also the realities that they're living in, which equips them far more on their behavior. And I also think you meet someone who's 18 or 19 and you say to them, you're young, live your life. It's actually my view, personal view. It's irresponsible. Because at 18 or 19, you can make a decision that lands you in jail. So we've got to also say, you have to have some sense of responsibility. You are a grown-up now, right? You can't be 16 and dating a white girl and then spending your time alone in her house and hope that one day nothing happens. You have to know if you make mistakes, there's going to be consequences to that. If she wakes up tomorrow and says, no, we went together and this guy misbehaved and sexually assaulted me, the consequences of that, you're 16. So we can't say to you just because you're young, right? We have to actually give you the tools to be your best. And the more we deprive our children, especially of the realities of our lives, the harder it is. Because we have a sense of shame and pride. Our house is small, but we're sending our kids to St. John's. Well, if you have the right friends in the right environment, your size of your house doesn't matter. You are saying to your children, I'm giving you the best shot, right? Go ahead and use that best shot.
But you know what I worry about with regards to that? I did have a friend, somebody that I knew, who was on a bursary to, I think it's St. David's, one of the fancy schools. St. David's. One of those. Yeah, one of the Saints. You know the Saints. Yeah. Went to one of the Saints, but he was on a rugby bursary. And worse, he was coming from like rural outside of the country. I won't even say the country because somebody could like pick up the story. I already said the school name at that time.
But you're not sure. We just said
yeah, it's one of the Saints. But okay, comes on a bursary scholarship, rugby, from out of the country. And I mentioned out of the country because he was coming from the village. And you understand, village South Africa versus village Malawi is very different. You know what I mean? So this person was really like, it was a hop and a skip and a jump. But this person has done very well for themselves right now. But I see how they're traumatized. Their whole, mind thinking everything surrounds themselves around not losing this class that they've made it to, and gaining more, steam in a specific class. And it breaks my heart when I have a chat with him because he doesn't see how far he's come, right? And I find that often when people, I'll tell you with myself. So I went to government school throughout, and then when I got to grade 9, I went to a private school. And throughout government school, I didn't really, because I was in primary, I didn't really see a social classing or whatever. It was just like, oh, whatever. But when I got to this private school now, there was such a big jump. Because I remember there was this other kid when schools closed, a helicopter will land on the field to come pick him up.
Wow.
There was another one where it was like a line of the X5, and I didn't go to like a very fancy private school. It was an okay private school. A line near the X5 and bodyguards come pick up the one kid. And you're just like, Now you realize.
Yeah, but
Now I look at my own dad like I.
you see, this is why you must have pragmatic conversations with your children.
But okay, so firstly, that was the first time I was exposed to classing as an individual. The first time really seeing what classing is. Like, oh, there's rich.
Yeah, because you weren't at the top anymore. Where you were coming from, you were probably at the top of that class structure.
Maybe not top, but I was part of the average. I
Yeah,
was just,
I like that because they're saying we are noticing because
you are now.
You are now. Yeah,
because
true.
there probably were other kids
exactly who
looking
saw
in
you
that space
and saying, "Oh
and
my
saying,
God, there are people who come with
everywhere.
poloni to school, right?"
That's
You're right.
true.
Actually,
That's
okay.
actually
Yes,
true.
perhaps. Yeah, I would have never said the top, but yes, I hear you. There were other kids like, oh, okay, fine. Yeah, because they did call me cheese girl.
My point exactly.
Now that I think about it.
Yeah, my point exactly. Yeah.
So fine. But just to explain that was the first time where I was like, damn, there's real money out there and there's real rich kids. And that was the first time I was seeing classing. But it definitely did like spark a new like motivation in me that I didn't have before, And although I think it was good that I had duality in the sense that I had seen that, okay, we're not terrible, but we're not that. And then, but it also made me like have this newfound like, I need to work hard. I never ever thought about like making money. And it was okay for me because I'm now towards the end of high school. I'm about to step into varsity, and it's okay for me to start thinking like that. But I worry about instilling this thing in your child who you're sending to one of the saints off a bursary or off your very last cents as a parent, putting them in that position where for 12 years they're constantly reminded that they're not of a certain standing, social standing, and what it can do for their self-esteem. Do you get what I'm saying,
hear
guys?
I hear you,
2 points. First point is we're not entitled to life without trauma. No one is entitled to that. I've even said that to my no one is entitled to that. I say that to my children as well. I tell them, I will do things that will traumatize you. As your dad who loves you, there are things I'm going to do that I think are right that will hurt you, and you will think about them at 45. I'm sorry. I'm sorry now, right? The second part to that, I think, which is more important, is there are two different conversations. There's the pragmatic conversation of circumstance, then the real conversation of identity. You are not less loved because you are on bursary. You are not less valuable because you are on bursary. You are not less of a person because they are white kids and they are black kids and they don't sit together. No. My child's identity is predicated on me ensuring their character is sound.
I like
right? And I need to give them that confidence. That's my job as their father.
I like
I need to make sure they understand they are loved, they are safe, even if we're sharing a slice of bread. We, the 4 of us, 5 of us, 8 of us in this house, love each other. We have your back. Everyone else in the world may hate you, but when you come home, this is the safest place. Whenever you feel like something is not great for you, know that when you walk into that gate, that door, this one room, this is the best place for you because you're loved. Now, if you don't have that conversation and then you send your kid to those environments, then you are challenging them, which is irresponsible.
Do you know? Yeah.
Right. So the responsibility is the identity and the confidence of your child is your job as a parent. And then giving them the tools to advance is also your job, but is predicated on the fact that their foundation is sound. And I think we those two discussions are very different. And we must really work on the first one. Because the imposter syndrome happens because you feel like you shouldn't be here. So I tell my kid, walk straight. There's no environment you should not feel like you can't be yourself. Be yourself. If you don't understand, ask. We will help you. If I don't understand as your dad, I'll find someone who will and will explain to you what you need to do in that environment. That's my job, right? And after that, you must know that if those guys don't accept you, don't love you, don't treat you fair, don't do you right, when you return, when you walk out of that taxi through that gate, you are in heaven because we love you here. Here we do love. And I think it's important to classify those two things and be clear about it. Because if we don't, then what happens is your child then thinks this, say David, say John, say Stithia's thing is their identity. It's not. It is a car that takes you to a destination that is better than where we are circumstantially today.
I have to
this.
just agree with that, hey?
Yeah.
The thing of no one is entitled to a life without trauma. It's so big. I feel like we need to have a a separate episode discussing just that. I think people fail to understand Uguti, life is a huge die. Like when you're playing dice. Like it's a very complicated dice. Like it is so unpredictable and so many different pieces of thousands and billions of decisions. Imagine how impossible, it's just impossible for anyone to go through life without trauma because everyone is making small decisions that could lead to you being traumatized. Like everyone on every single day, someone can make a decision. Guys, we live in a world where, whether connected or not, someone can make a decision in Australia and it'll traumatize your life.
Correct.
You get what I mean? Like it's just impossible. So what we can control is the thing of creating a home where the traumas of the world, when you get here, we build. When we get here, we heal. When we get here, we make sure that you can speak about that trauma and have a sense of healing. We can find therapy for you. It's just impossible. The dice we live on, guys, like imagine a dice that depended on human decisions as to what number it lands on. It would be impossible, you know? And then another thing I wanted to ask you, I actually had two questions that are running in my mind. The other one perhaps can be a part of the conversation we have later. So the first one being, do you think that people, particularly us, the younger generation, when our parents were the ones who were liberated, they saw the end of apartheid, and then they took us to school, and they were very education focused, right? They wanted us to get. Do you think that we overestimated what our parents could achieve in us? And what I mean by that is there are some courses that some of people in our generation chose without realizing that thing you're choosing is going to require for your parents to push you for yet another few years, if that makes sense. You understand? There are some qualifications where you do it, we all know. After you do this, you're coining it, you know? The secrets that Abobonga hold, and don't share with the public. You know? You know what I mean? Yeah, not everybody knows. Then there are those qualifications where your parents will need to push you just a bit further. And do you think that there is amongst us, particularly in the Black community, considering that we are in the process of building ourselves financially? Then the other question is regards to wills. I'm curious and it might be a little bit of an off-ramp, but I'm curious in terms of when you say the way that you should approach conversations with your kids and talk to them and just be frank with them and have pragmatic conversations. What are your thoughts on discussing a will with your children? At what age and what impact do you think it would have?
So I think it depends where you are. So I'll answer the second question first. So the pragmatic conversations are more valuable when there's a lot at stake, right? So when you're using that R1 to get your kid to a UCT, that pragmatic conversation is very real because then the kid understands how risky or how fine the margins are for them, right? But if you are much older and much wealthier, the discussions are very different. You're now talking about how do you use your opportunity set at UCT for the advantage of yourself and the family? So it's a different conversation. So where you are on the wealth spectrum determines a lot about that conversation. So if you don't have much to discuss, if you pay off your house and you maybe have another 2-3 properties, you can sit with your kids and say, this is it. And that's really not much to dispute. Your will is your will. But if you now have 50, 80, 100 million, or you have 10, 20 properties, or whatever it is, it's sizable, then the conversation is different. How do you apportion that wealth? What do you do with it? I mean, what's his name? The Berkshire Hathaway agent, Warren Buffett, he recently released a paper on how he's divvying out his wealth to his kids and how they are managing it. He's talking about hundreds of billions. So it's a completely different conversation because those kids have generational wealth. Their great-grandchildren don't ever have to work. Whereas if you are right now, you come from a rondavel and you're now sitting there and you paying off your house is the goal. After that, you sit with your kids and say, hey, listen, this is what we have. We have two apartments and a house, and this is how we believe it can be divvied out, right? So I think the conversations vary based on where you are economically. The lower you are on the economic scale, the way more transparent and pragmatic you have to be, because one small decision takes that all away. Whereas if you are at Warren Buffett's kids level, they can make, and they probably make multitude bad decisions and still be okay ad infinitum. So your discussion about them becomes very different, right?
That's why it's easy for them to get caught into drugs.
Yes,
And
still
be
have a
CEO
trust.
one day.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
And still bumpy. They still invest in your idea and still make that right. So the second question,
Deep.
I think we tend to theorize our
I'm not
parents.
saying you should do drugs if you've got money.
No,
Sorry.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Fair play.
Needed to.
We understand.
I just
we
realized
are not here to promote the use
I'm not saying
of.
that. I'm just saying that they've got
YouTube.
more cushion.
Yeah, I think that to the first question, I think we theorize what our parents went through. I think, and we theorize it because we don't understand deeply a world where you don't have access, right? And they lived in a world where access was not a given. So even access to parts of the city was not given, right? So when they see you, all they're trying to do is give you that. So when they see you go to university, their fundamental hope is, oh no, their fundamental hope is no, he's gonna get this big job. No, their hope is, I genuinely hope they grasp this experience because it wasn't afforded to them. Right? So they don't even know what it means. They don't know what it means to sit down and write an exam. And those who do know what it means look at their lives and say, if only I could have gotten a job at, because I had the marks, I had the ability, and so on and so forth. So they live a life where their goal is to give you access or more. And the more has a limit. It has a limit because they didn't have access. They didn't have the opportunity to save. They didn't have the opportunity to buy assets. And then they came out of freedom and they grasped at some of these opportunities as best as they knew how. There was no post-apartheid black educational institution that helped the majority of South Africans to go there and learn about acquiring assets, saving, and so on and so on and so on and so forth. So when we look at our parents and our grandparents, like, why are you guys still voting the ANC? Because their real life lived experience is the access you enjoy is fundamentally linked to the party. So I think we theorize a lot. I think we have to have a lot of grace for our parents, and we also have to ensure that our kids over time understand that they will need a lot of grace for us, because we are also, I always tell my wife, I don't think our kids know how much we're winging it. We're really winging it out here. We no matter how many books, how many parenting lectures or things, seminars we go to, we're all winging it. So a simple answer to your question is, there's a point in our lives we must let our parents go. They did what they could with what they had, with what they know. Some of them more so, some of them less so. However, we are now grown. We now must accept our role and our responsibility. You can't at 30 be still blaming your mom and dad. There's a point where you must also accept this is now your life and you have some responsibilities and you do your best with what you have for you and yours. And hopefully your children and their children will continue doing that as well.
I must be honest, I only hit this realization. I like the number that you're saying, 30. At around 30, I said, sure, you really enjoyed blaming them for everything. And you can't do it anymore.
Exactly.
You know, where even seeking my parents' approval was in an attempt to be able to blame them if it doesn't go right. Do you get what I'm saying? Where instead of just owning that, okay, you guys don't want to do it, I want to do it, and I'm going to bet on myself.
I see.
You know, was difficult. So it became easier to be like, I didn't become great because you guys didn't say yes. Actually.
And recognizing that that's a luxury of your class.
Yeah. Oh.
Right.
Okay,
the ability
wait.
to say to your parents it's your fault is a luxury of your class. If you take someone who's at a much lower class, and this is not to rank human beings, right? They don't have that luxury. They can't sit there and say, my mom was a domestic worker. This was my life, and I'm doing what I have to do. And I think this is why pragmatic conversations matter. They matter because you may not realize what your parents are doing to put you in the position to win. right? And because your parents, and a simple thing,
Sure,
a simple thing where your parents
not
hide when they
realize.
argue as a married couple. So you now get married and you have a fight with your wife. You're like, oh my God, this thing is falling apart, right? Whereas if they were pragmatic and told that me and your mom are two different human beings, we love each other and we will disagree occasionally. It does not mean we're leaving each other. And then your child can grow with the knowledge that there are two human beings who can love each other and disagree and still live a happy life, right? And that knowledge equips them. So if your parents didn't have that pragmatic conversation, listen, Ashley, we are limited in our knowledge. And they may not even have the language or the ability to communicate that to you. So you live in this world where you say, but you're choosing for me. But that's what they think is right. And that's their responsibility, right? When you are now your own adult, you can't then blame them. If you don't like the degree they forced you to study another. Like it's
Really?
That's a very
move
hard
on.
pill to swallow.
Yeah, move on.
Yeah.
Right? You've got to accept. And this is
Yeah.
why, especially as black people, we have to have
Sure.
pragmatic conversations with each other, with our children, with our spouses, with our siblings. We have to be real. If there's a scenario in which there's 3 of you in the house and your mom is unwell, one guy is a doctor, the other 2 people are teachers. Like we can't contribute equally. I don't have the money. I'm a teacher. So we have to have a frank conversation. Hey, Butom Tala, you're the one with $1 million. Like I can contribute proportionately to my income, but you are the one who's going to carry this. But if you don't have that pragmatic discussion, we arrive at black tax. Right? So we need to have these very clear conversations with each other about our money, where we stand, what's important. Because if we don't, you end up with what you're saying, the luxury of being able to say it's my parents' fault. That's a luxury of a black middle class individual.
To be honest, as you're speaking, especially this part around, if you don't have these very frank discussions, you won't know the efforts your parents are putting in to put you in certain rooms and certain spaces. It's so true, because I remember realizing that my dad comes from one of the poorest villages in Malawi. You know, my mom is a nurse. You know, my dad's an engineer. I keep making an example with my family. That's all I know.
Yeah, fairly.
But just realizing how these people work really hard
Yes.
to have me here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And for me to now turn around and after all their hard work, it's a spit in the face to be like, that degree was all for you.
Yeah.
And it's a spit in the face
Yeah.
because they work really, really hard to
Yes.
get you in that room, to get you at UP, to get you to hong. My mom likes to say,
Yes.
like this English that you're speaking is my money. Whenever I correct her English, she's like, that's my money, girl.
That's correcting me right now.
They like took you there for that.
Yes, you know. And so it's exactly that sometimes, because I could have never thought of it like that. I think when I was younger, you don't see what it is to come from a certain social class and really work hard.
Yeah,
to
and that's
become-
on us. That's on us.
I
We
remember-
have to tell people around us
yes.
that reality.
But also that's something a child can't grasp, man. Don't you think
They
something
can easily,
No,
children grasp the
definitely.
deepest of
Do you,
things.
do you know one day we were at my dad's village and he was like just chatting with his friends and introducing us to like his friends and seeing that. And then I said, Dad, actually, how did you do it? Because he really, with all respect, his friends became teachers in the village,
Yes.
became principals in the village,
Yes.
became, but still within the context of where they come from, And then I looked at him in a different way. But
Correct.
now this is in my 20s. I said, damn, how'd you do it?
Yeah.
Actually, because now it's me that needs to work and elevate myself into the next social class. And I'm seeing that it is not,
It's not
an
easy.
easy task.
Yeah. And this is why children from very disadvantaged backgrounds who break that glass ceiling do it, and they do it big because they have real conversations. I've got a friend of mine, he grew up with his grandmother, and he always tells a story that it was a cold day, he didn't have shoes walking to school, and his grand basically told him, this is now your life. If you stay at home, that's your choice. You know this is your one shot. And he was 8, I think he says he was 8. And his grand had that frank conversation with him. It's cold, you can go to school, and school is a pathway out, or you can opt out of your life and stay at home. Right? So those are the dynamics. So when he then breaks the glass ceiling and he moves on to become this great person, he understood from the very beginning where his life was at. Right? When we move into the middle classes, we don't have this conversation with our children. We protect them with our Mercs and these great schools. We don't sit down and say, hey, listen, guys, we are thread away. Yeah. Like if
One
dad makes a bad call, if mom makes a bad call, we're moving, right? And they must know that and take the opportunities they have given to them. And it's not pressure. It's knowing what it is and where you're at. And that knowledge is what it's like when you listen to Kobe Bryant and he says, I found what I loved when I was really young. So it gave me an advantage over everybody else because I knew this is what I wanted to do and I went for it.
Worked on it.
Yeah. Whereas if you don't have that, this is our life, this is where we're at, we then have these multiple scenarios. And this is why I'm saying we mustn't theorize with our parents. In retrospect, your dad might tell you, if I had known better, I would have taken you to the village every year. Then you would have seen as we go there every year what it means where we're at. But now he doesn't. He didn't know at the time. And that's our responsibility. Take our kids to where they should go, expose them to the right environments, expose them to kids who are walking and not, expose them to taxis and driving and seeing how other people live. That will give them a very different perspective of their lives. So I think it's a difficult thing to do, but it's something we must get used to.
How would you say, first of all, do you think it's important for a person to be aware of what social class they're in? And then I'm looking at, I know this was circulating recently on social media, this income class thing where they show the different brackets. Like if you're from 0 to 54,000 a year, they consider you poor. 50 to 151, yes, a year though. Keep that in mind.
So it's less than 5,000 rand a month if you look at it.
So a middle class person in South Africa, if you're considered middle class, realized middle class, you should be earning anywhere between 363,000 a year to 631. You're a realized middle class. According to income.
Yeah. So 30,000 rand a month to 50,000 rand a month.
Yes, exactly. So now my question is, do you think that it's important for people to be aware of where they fit in those brackets, or do you think these are just academic? And also, is there a difference between social class, which one can say is a more broader term, that also speaks to the type of networks you have, that speaks to where you live, that type of demographic, the people that surround you within the area, what part of Joburg, what part of Pretoria, what part, even Ekasi, there are parts of Ekasi that have proper money. Do you think, first of all, do you think that there's a difference between income class and social class? And maybe some people get confused as to...
So I think money is easy to measure. So it's easy to measure rands and cents.
Yeah, true.
You can't measure network. There's no valuation you can put on a network, right? So the money side is helpful. It's a helpful indicator, right? The second point is to say it is important to know because then it dictates your actions. You know now the kind of game you're playing and how to go about winning, right?
But it's also depressing.
No, but
I just listened to that and I said,
no, it's depressing. It's depressing because you don't have pragmatic conversations. It's depressing because you live, quote unquote, in a bubble and you feel your bubbles burst when you are faced with reality. But if you are faced with reality from the beginning, you are a black woman in South Africa. There's something that means. Are you the same as a black woman in Afghanistan? No. But you're not the same as a black woman in the UK or in Australia or in the US. And those dynamics, once you realize those dynamics, then you make a set of decisions that help you get to wherever it is your goals are. So we need to move away from not having the real discussions in our lives, even with ourselves. Have a realistic discussion with yourself. Why does that depress you?
Sure.
And I understand that. There's a reason that it depresses you. And once you have the answer to that, you now know where you are in your life and why you have a sense of under or overachievement, why you have a sense of, call it arrogance or fake humility. Why do you have that?
Sure.
Because you must address that. And that's the reality. And until we
do the deep work. Do the deep work so that doesn't affect you.
So going to Michael House doesn't solve that. What it does, it gives you exposure and potentially access. So you can find a 40, 50-year-old guy who'll say, I went to Michael House and we've got a WhatsApp group of black Michael House boys. But what does that mean in reality? For you, in real terms, can you WhatsApp on the group, guys, I'm trying to buy this company, I need 5 million. Can the guys put their hands up? Yes or no? Guys, I lost my wife. Do I need help? Will that WhatsApp group help you? Yes or no? Then you can make peace with, this is a real brotherhood or it's a vanity metric. It's vanity that we black guys are together in this thing. And once you know that reality, then you deal with it accordingly. Then you know what you're putting in there, what you're not putting there, what it is you're doing and what it is you're not doing. And I think one of the fundamental flaws we have as people living in the global south or in the developing world is not accepting our realities. There's a large part of our realities that's outside of our control. ESCOM is outside of our control. Water is outside of our control. How the municipalities run is outside of control. What we have is every 5 years we get to choose a bunch of guys and we hope they do the best job. That's outside of us. So in this knowledge, we then should be different in our behavior. So we privatize security. We privatize energy, we get solar panels. We privatize water, we get Jojo tanks. When you see those type of things, they are a pragmatic reaction to our circumstance, right? And we look, the government's not working. Fair, it may or may not be working in your eyes, but what does it mean for you? Are you having a genuine conversation with yourself about where you're at, what you're trying to achieve, and are you conditioning your life for that? Are you ready for the sacrifice? Are you ready for the pains, the rejections? Are you ready for the highs of that? Are you going to, when you get promoted, when you earn more money, how do you feel? Are you pragmatic about that? Do you now change your car because partners can only drive Range Rovers? They can't drive XYZ. No, C-Class is not enough. Is that true? Or is that your perception of what partners must do? And dealing with that. Or when I reach this certain level, I can tell because I got a Burberry handbag. Is that true? Right? And if it is true, good. If it isn't, and true not in general, but true for you, where are you? And then where are me and my wife? Where are me, my wife, and my children? And having real conversations. And sometimes it's hard. It's hard to hear your wife say, today you botched up being a dad. It was a botch up what you did. You did this and this to the kids and it hurts them. It's hard to hear that. It's hard. It's hard to hear her say, I actually don't feel loved. For the last 2-3 months, you haven't shown me love. I don't feel loved. It's a hard conversation. But that conversation lets me know where I am with her. Because if she doesn't say that, then I move on with my life thinking everything is cool. Then I get hit by a bus when she's like, I want out. How? And we as black people need to do that. We need, for our own personal survival and growth. When we are all now past the poverty threshold and we are a developed economy where 80% of us are in the middle class, then we can have different conversations. But at this point, we have to have real conversations because you are one generation away from rural Malawi. That's the real thing. Yeah, it's a real thing. Whether you can look at it any other way, but you are one generation away from rural Malawi. And you need to have that view of yourself. So when you walk into a room, that reality must be in your room. And that's why you can challenge imposter syndrome, because you understand who you are and where you come from and what class you are in and your income. So you can't be popping bottles. You know that for every bottle I'm taking away from this. But another guy who's earning 100,000 rand a month can afford bottles. It's not taking away from his future, right? He's got a pension that's in the millions. He's got a house. He's paying off. He's got he's a different person in a different class with different struggles, right? And they must look at their lives pragmatically and understand where they're coming from and what it means for them.
He cries, but in a Bentley.
Yes. and there are real burdens around that, where you must deal with being in a Bentley. Because you then sit and say, what happens when I no longer can drive a Bentley? I once had a deep conversation with he's a dollar millionaire now. And the guy said to me,
you gotta separate the two.
Yeah,
a rand's millionaire and a dollar millionaire.
And he got married late in his life, right? And he said to me, and we're sitting down and we're mates for a while now. So he said to me, every time I go to bed, I don't know. There's a 1% of me that asks myself, is this woman sleeping next to me because of my money? That's his lived experience. So yes, he's in a Bentley, right? But that's what he's going through. And he needs to address that. And if he had a pragmatic conversation with his missus, He may find out that's assuming also his missus will be honest about things, and she would tell him honestly, yeah, your security means a lot to me. And a large part I'm with you is the security you provide. And when you have that pragmatic conversation, you now know where you stand, right? And I think those are the discussions we don't have, and we need to start having them.
Yo,
Sure. I really liked this conversation. We changed a little bit from social mobility, but I'll tell you, especially for me around like children and how much you tell children, and the balance between the two of like, this is a household of love, and love is where you come from. You're human, you're loved, you come from a good family, versus, but we're not doing too well and you need to work hard and you need to seize the opportunities, and bringing both of those to the fore so that your child knows that money doesn't make me who I am, right? But I need to work really hard if I want to make money, because this is where I come from. And that's definitely something before this conversation I would have been like, no, you must shield your children. They mustn't know, because they shouldn't have the burden of, but you're right. There is a way to do it.
That's why I
exposes them to both.
That's why I asked the question about the will thing, because that's something that my dad was quite intentional about. He had that conversation with me. And I can say that it didn't make me think, in terms of, I've something waiting for me, let me be squanderous or anything like that. And maybe it was also a discernment on his part of, this is the kind of son or of my children. I can talk to this one about it. But it does leave me curious as to maybe sometimes we do hide more than we should.
There's a parting shot. I think, and I had this conversation with my kids. So I opened bank accounts for them, and we don't pay them for chores, but if they do things extraordinary well, we do give them some contribution. And there's one day we printed their bank statements and they're sitting there, and my son is like, hey, what are these charges? We're like, they're bank charges. The bank charges you to keep your money there. And I remember I encountered that when I was at varsity. Right, where you put money in, and then varsity is a shoestring budget. Then suddenly this 35 rand goes off, and those couple of loaves of bread, right? You know that kind of dynamic. And it struck me that he now, in his knowledge, knows the money will be taken from you for keeping it in the bank. So I think it's important to engage your kids. Like, we printed out their school fee statements, and mom's pay slip, dad's pay slip, and they're 10 and 8.
You're joking.
Yeah. They said, this is the house. This is where the money comes from. So when we say we're trying to do this, or trying to go on this holiday, and we need to save 20,000, and we say we can't do X because our budget is limited, they understand. They also understand that we work hard. So every weekend I take my kids to the office. So they sit there, I print out maths, things for them, they do them while I work.
They see
see it, oh my God, like, this guy, he doesn't go to some mysterious place called the office. And they walk in, they sit down, okay, man, he works, this guy. Right? And so those exposures give them the right sort of
you're
mentality.
doing a good job.
Jesus,
there are about 3 experiences that I always, and even on the channel, this is not the first time people are going to be hearing this story, but I just always think about this Yebo Khocha period at Wits, where the school, I think it's geology, they show school kids, it's directed to school kids, they show them like different species. And then I was looking at these kids, they can barely put a sentence together, and they're already walking Wits. So they know there's some huge place where adults go post varsity, post school, to say, I can study there. One guy I know is doing his PhD. His mother, like you, would take him to lectures on school holidays, and he's like, I want to be something like this. Now he has a PhD. Even my experience, before my sister went to university, I didn't know there was a thing like that. I didn't know that you need to work towards going to varsity.
That you need to qualify.
That you need to qualify and stuff. There are so many things. One example of just exposure that you're talking about. There's a kid who was visiting and was asking, where do you guys go in the mornings? You wake up, you go every morning. What's happening? And we're like, it's work. He's like, he has adults around him, but he's never seen people leaving every single morning to go somewhere because people around him don't work.
Exactly.
So he doesn't have the concept of work. For me, that was a huge thing.
And it's important that what you'll find is your child now will grow up with the assumption that she's going to varsity.
Yes.
It will be assumed.
Yeah,
by her,
it's a norm.
right? Because you went through that, so you've shifted gears for an entire generation.
Yes.
Right. So these, I think, having that honest conversation with her will also help her. And I find that with children, the more honest you are, and they see your struggles. So like my kids are relatively athletic, so when they go to do these sports things, I'll go to gym, and I'll never forget my eldest boy said to me, like, seeing you work out made me confident that I can work out. And it clicked to me. Oh, so when I'm walking around telling the guy, no, run faster, it means nothing to him until he sees his dad lift weight. Then he's like, okay, so he's not a hypocrite, right? And these are the sort of things we are shy about as black people. Let your kids see. Let them see you struggle. Let them see you argue with your wife and see how conflict is resolved healthily, right? And walk through that, because in reality, in an unhealthy environment, kids are seeing families unravel and seeing mom and dad argue in a violent manner where they don't see it healthy. So we have the opportunity of actually showing them health, that mom and dad actually didn't agree on this, but we are still here, we're still together, still love each other, and this is how we resolved it. And they see it through you, right? And I'm by no means a perfect parent, please. Don't let
No, definitely
I'm winging
not.
it. But I think it's more a case of, I recognize that pragmatism with children is important. And them understanding where they are and what they're doing.
When you said, please, I'm not a perfect parent, Ashla goes, oh, no, definitely not.
Yeah, she's right.
No, man, I just mean.
No, she's right. The tone is quite cheeky, but she's right.
Your tone was very cheeky.
I didn't mean. I was just saying, like, we understand
Point
that
taken.
there
Point
is
taken.
no, definitely there is no. Can't come and tell the time. But you know what? As you see, even somebody, I remember somebody saying that, you'll find parents pestering kids to read a book, but you've never picked up a book
and set it. Yeah.
But I've never seen you do it.
Exactly.
It's something I noticed with my daughter, ne? Like, when it comes to saying thank you, she says thank you regardless of what, even when she's playing with other kids and anyone gives her something, Tetu, like, it's just something she's learned from us. And she says, if you say thank you, she'll say you're welcome. And that's because that's just something we do, not just with her, but with each other.
Yeah.
Then there are other things we notice. She, like saying sorry. It's not something that she picks up on very quickly. And I don't know, because sorry is not something you say every day.
True.
Right?
But I hear what you're saying.
You understand,
at.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like, it's not something that you're constantly saying to each other because you don't need...
sorry.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. So I'm wondering, Guti, that one, is she finding it hard to... Because she'd rather let the house burn.
I think I think children are stubborn in general, but I think to speak to that from my experiences, she doesn't need multiple examples of you apologizing to each other to understand it. If she sees it happen, then she knows this is the standard, and you can refer to that. So I was like, remember, mommy and daddy were arguing about the peanut butter. Yes. Did you see daddy said he was wrong? Yes. What did daddy say to mommy? Sorry. So do you see that what you did was wrong? Yes. So what must you say to mommy? Sorry. Okay, cool. Right?
Good
So
point.
that dynamic helps. It doesn't have to be an everyday thing about apologizing, just laying down the principle and them seeing you live it out. I think it's a difficult thing. I mean, especially as a black man, it's hard to say sorry in general. Like, we don't take instructions well. I think as being told what to do as dudes is just... when you model to your children, when you can, that, hey, actually, this woman was right and I was wrong and I take the L. So in their minds, they can live in a world where they say, yeah, even as a man, with all my masculinity, I can be wrong. And I can be wrong to a woman, right? Which is dynamics we need to introduce into our society in a broader scale.
True.
As we are like just chatting, I'm having an epiphany on my own experience of social mobility. So I live in a township, even in high school, right? But I went to a school in a very nice suburb area. So I leave this township, go to 3 Rivers, And I'm thinking about my walk back to the mall to get taxis. You see these huge houses with tennis courts, and that just opened up my world to the possibilities. So just what you're speaking about, to the nuance of about social mobility. So my parents were able to shift me in terms of the school, although we live in a township, but they were able to shift me in terms of the school I go to and the area it's in, and how that alone also influenced my experience, despite the fact that I go back to that township.
Correct.
But just that shifting to say there are houses that can have a tennis court, or whatever. I see that on my way to the taxi rank, that's going to take me back to my township.
So here's the kicker now. The unfortunate bit is our parents don't know the volume of work between your township house and that tennis court house. So let me give you an example. So you have an athlete who says, I want to be a Springbok, right? And they're 10 years old. And they have a dad who's never played rugby in their life, right? So what the dad now needs is to go to a coach who knows what it takes to move you from a under 12, under 13 level to Springbok level. And that volume of work, what you have to do to get to Springbok level, is not common knowledge. If it was, there'd probably be a lot more competition at Springbok level. So it's not something you can easily pick up on the street. You need to meet the right coaches, the right nutritionist, the right strength and conditioning guys that will put you in the position to be able to do the amount of work to get you to Springbok, to educate you on the nuances, how coaches think, how they feel, how they select, how to make your province, how to, all that. No, you don't have it, right? So your parents are showing you, this is the house, you see it. But what they can't give you is the volume of work to move from me in a taxi to me in a house at the tennis court. And that's the hard part. So we supplement that volume of work with what you're talking about, handbags, Porsche Cayennes or whatever. And we think, okay, we've done the job. But the real volume, what it takes to move that, is the information we need to share. It's the information we need to understand and share. Say, it's going to cost you everything and then some. And you still might not see it. Your children will see that house at the tennis court, not you. And understanding that, the volume of work, that's where the magic is. Because if you don't understand that gap, you are always going to be grasping for straws. And that's why the good book says, seek and you shall find. You must be about the business of seeking out information that tells you what you need to do to move from taxis to that tennis court house, right? And then the second part is being able to pay a price, which is what also Jesus asked his disciples, are you willing to pay my price? You want to sit on my left hand and on my right hand? You know the goal. But are you going to go through what I'm going to go through? Are you going to pay the price I'm going to pay? Right? Are you going to carry my cross? Right? And I think it was Andrew and James, they didn't really know what they were saying. And Jesus told them, you don't know what you're asking. So in essence, they didn't know the volume of work that Jesus had to go through to actually be called Lord. And there's a volume of work that you and me have to go through to get our goals, to achieve them. And the ignorance of that is what leaves us deprived. And that hurdle is hard to climb because it's not easily accessible information. We think if we send our kids to the right environment, they'll vicariously glean how to make money. No, they may learn how to walk a certain way, dress a certain way, speak a certain way. But the characteristics of making and developing a wealthy household is a very different thing. And that's the important bit, the volume of work.
You know, this it's an unending thing. Just when I sit and think about the just how complex it is, I'm just thinking about even when you break some of these barriers. For example, let's say you do get a corporate job. One barrier to your social mobility could be, like you said, how you speak, you know, how you dress. It's not fitting for that space. Or now we are having even conversations around hair types, you know, the fact that in this space, maybe your afro is not really that welcome, you know. So I'm just thinking about it's actually way deeper than
Yes, and that's why you have to be pragmatic. You have to sit down with yourself and say, okay, my English is not great for my law career. I've got one or two choices. I either practice law somewhere where my English really is not a particular issue, so you might have to move. Or you make peace with the fact that I actually need to sit with a tutor. I've got another friend of mine, he learned how to swim in his 30s. Because you're saying, I can now afford to take my kids to the beach and here I am on the sand and they're in the water. This is embarrassing. So he literally went and taught literally went and learned how to swim. He had no shame about it. He was pragmatic. I didn't have pools where I grew up with, so I must learn. So in his 30s, he learned how to swim, right? And that is a pragmatic thing. Now he can go to the beach with his kids. He can go into the pool with his kids. He's happy, right? And those are the kind of things you need to look at your life and say, okay, my chosen career path needs eloquence. I need to work on that. So who do I talk to who can help me with dialect, who can help me with how to speak, and go to a speech therapist and work through that. And it's easier to say, no, English is not my mother. Fine. But in your career, are you going to succeed in it not knowing how to speak English like that? Right? And having that pragmatic conversation. When you're now wealthy, you can now say, look at Jay-Z, he can grow dreads. He's not a billionaire. Jay-Z is not interviewing for a job, so he can dress how he wants. Right? The rest of us, we must shave and cut our hair and wear suits because we are going to apply for jobs. We're on LinkedIn. Jay-Z doesn't need LinkedIn. Right? So he can dress how he wants. Kanye can dress how he wants. They are rich. They don't need to talk to people in the right way. They can be rude. It's not right, but they can be who they are. The rest of us who need to have a certain set of rules we need to comply to, which is the fuel you need to burn to break through, is we have to comply by those rules. I remember when I was my first job, it was in fund administration. So guys would apply for jobs, and what would happen is the manager would come and give you a CV, then give you a framework. Say, for example, the manager say, if they come from XYZ secondary school, out. If it says secondary school, out.
Yeah.
From jump, out.
Absolutely.
Okay. Then they say, okay, if they didn't go to a top 5 university, so Tuks, UJ, UCT, and on that basis, people were excluded from interview process. And they'll just say they'll give you a whole big blah because of this and that, you're not. And I thought about that really hard. I was like, wow, like you don't have much of a choice about you went to XYZ secondary school. Like you further don't have a choice that you went to Fort Hare. So already we are out of this conversation on those 2 counts alone. Right. So it made it stark to me that if my children go to those schools, I have to be very real with them. You're probably not going to work at Absa Standard Bank, my boy. It's just not going to happen because of where you're going to school. I have to tell you now. It's a hard thing to accept, but the person on the other side who's looking at your CV is not going to think about you in the same light. They'll think about a kid who arrives with a Sacred Heart and I went to Kearney College. They're not going to see you the same. And understand that. So what it means is you have to bust your ass. We have to find alternative ways to make you a CA. Right? And I have to make that decision. And I will help you, but this is the reality. And I think those things matter in understanding where we are and having that conversation.
But definitely, Tam, you're also speaking from a place where you've put in the work and you have that kind of knowledge. Because ideally, somebody, these examples, Puteri secondary, right? The parent that's taking them, they doesn't know even the career CA.
Yeah, at all.
So before they can even have that pragmatic chat, usually that's why the way they end is to say, look on TV, bona doctor. Because that's as far as they can go with regards to being able to show you that there's more.
This is why I lament the ending of Top Billing. Top Billing was a fantastic show for social mobility. It gave kids and adults a view of what life can be, and they took that away. The show ended, and I think it was a monumental crime by SABC. I don't know what happened between Batsetsana and SABC, but I think they need to bring that show back on that basis alone. It was very aspirational, and it helped a lot of us to go, there's a place called Franschhoek, and they have wine there. Oh, maybe one day, Nami, when I go to Cape Town, by chance, I must go to Franschhoek. Right? And it gave us that perspective. It was an important show. So
I'm Top Billing.
I'm also thinking about the fact that people generally don't know. Like when you drive by Stain City, you won't even know that it's there.
Yes.
Like Stain City is so it's incognito.
Yes.
And you won't know that how much people in that place earn. The only way I actually knew was watching a video of someone who went and interviewed Uban. What's his name?
Is it Dol State?
Yeah, I forgot his first name is. They interviewed him. They looked at his house at the center and then some of the houses around the area. That's the only way I was able to know that place even exists.
Affluent, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think those kind of shows.
such a
And you
great
lived
point.
up the road from.
No, this was way before.
Ah.
This was way before. I literally live one robot away.
Hey, especially an outing personal facts.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah,
you
yeah.
people, you're up the road. Yeah. It's not a safe space, Lapo, who's TCC. We're not safe.
So I also paused a little bit after I said it. And you live, I was like, you live,
So I think, broadly speaking, I think the summary to it all is spend time understanding you, and then when you understand you can help others. Understand your environment and where you're at, and maybe your career aspirations will never be achieved in South Africa. You need to go to the UK. It's a reality. And when you go to the UK, understand you're going to go down the social ladder, right? Immigration is really... It's a, so for example, you're giving an example of your dad. Had he stayed, he may have been a teacher, a politician, someone relatively, call it, higher standing in Malawi. But him moving here put him in a different tier of people. And he may have had to accept any job that was possible and so on and so on. So immigration downgrades you. I once met a guy from DRC. He was a doctor and he was my car guard. And I stopped. I'm like, you are what? He's like, yeah, I went to medical school in the DRC. And I'm like, so you opted? He's like, yeah, I'm trying to give a better life for my kids and my family. And I'm like, did you try and convert? He's like, yeah, I'm saving the money. I'm trying to convert. And I don't know where he is now. But that immigration, you drop down a few rungs in social
makes
mobility.
sense.
And it's something that we don't
But
think
also,
about.
isn't that now specifically if you're already dropping scales with regards to country? Because an American can't come here and say they're dropping.
Yeah, but...
Chances are that they are upgrading.
No, they're dropping. So there are places in South Africa that don't know who LeBron James is. He can, that's my point, right? he can come to South Africa and walk around and no one knows who he is.
Actually, there's a guy who did a video about this, that show you like watching. Yeah, the couple, they're raising kids. There's a grandmother as well.
Oh, a Blackish.
Yes, Blackish.
Yeah, the guy.
That guy.
Yeah.
He was
Anthony
in a,
Anderson.
In a grocery
Yeah.
store, like,
Nobody knows. Yeah.
Yeah,
And he was
exactly.
grooving in Cape Town. He
Yes.
was grooving hard. Anthony Anderson.
That's
and
what I'm
nobody
saying,
know him.
right? Exactly that. So they can move here and your lifestyle will change. That's a downgrade for a guy who has 200 million Instagram followers.
But no, man, I've been seeing these Americans that move to Africa and they can buy these lavish houses and they can live, along the riverbank.
No, I think
somewhere.
you're thinking of someone. I think it's different sides of that coin. You're thinking of someone who made it in the States, who has money, and now is coming here to spend that American dollar in South
value
Africa.
for money deal.
Okay.
That's not the same thing he's talking
The
about.
average
That's why,
person can't do what they're doing.
yes, that's what he's saying. So
Okay.
the average American cannot do the same
when
here.
coming to
Correct.
work, like now I'm going to go
So-
look
so
for
what
a
you-
job.
yeah, exactly.
Even if they're
Okay.
coming here maybe as a journalist, it won't be the same when they get here.
Yeah, okay.
You understand what
okay.
I mean? Yeah.
Okay.
It
They may
won't
have
be the
certain
same.
privileges, maybe they're white and their accent, whatever. But you're going to meet the top dog. So Rupert, when he goes to America, he's not a big billionaire. There's the Elon Musk who are at 300. He's at 345. Welcome. Nice to have you. He's not a big guy. When he's here, he's a big dog. Right? So migration has a way of knocking you back a few notches. And we don't discuss this as well. So when people move to Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Canada, they go there, they get depressed because suddenly they can't live the life they lived in South Africa. Well, that's part of what you gave up. You gave up your economic class. Right?
Another thing also around moving for me would also just be around grasping culture of a place that can also be very difficult and
will be hard.
isolating.
It will be hard. Your kids will understand it. You won't.
Yay.
It will be hard. I mean, okay, not to. So we went on holiday to the UK with my family, and I was at the till, and this guy's talking to me, and I can't hear his accent, and I'm like, what? Like I'm saying, sir, I can't hear you. And my eldest son took the money, gave the guy, got the change, and moved on. So my kid understood what this guy. I couldn't hear this guy's accent. My 40-year-old son couldn't hear what he was saying. Right? Yet my kid, who was 9 at the time, heard clearly what the guy was saying. Took the cash, did the deal, we moved on. I was like, did you hear what he said? Yeah, Dad. He was trying to say. So these dynamics, I could move to the UK and be dumb as hell, and my kids will thrive there because they are much younger, they're much more nimble, and so on. So it's you won't see the benefits. Your children will, and they will then have to build from breaking that cycle and trying to move up that class ladder, which is also hard. In established environments, it's much harder. You don't get a lot of guys going from poverty to the top end of middle class or further in more established environments, you're more likely to see it in our environment.
I'm about to start the language discussion, but we just don't have time.
Yeah, definitely.
We absolutely
Definitely.
do not have time. So we'll have to do it. We'll have. Can I? No.
No,
Okay,
definitely not.
I'm sorry. I thought I'd sneak in 1 or 2 sentences. Okay, Tammy, thank you so much for your
My
time.
pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And we always appreciate the wisdom that you share with us. We're really looking forward to your podcast. Am I allowed to throw forward to other stuff that you're doing?
No,
Okay.
don't do that.
I got the scoop. Yes. And I can't share it with you
Hey,
guys.
who needs enemies? Eh?
Yeah, you know, when you have me who's ready to tell the world your business. Tammy, thank you. Thank you, Bonga Given. That was today's episode of The Conversation Capital. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I really am so keen to hear the comments. So don't forget to comment and just, tell us your thoughts around social mobility and everything that we discussed today. See you next time.
Cheers.